Hello, everyone. Welcome. I thought I'd do a few examples with you about using the percentages, how to convert percentages to fractions and to decimals. You'll notice the worksheet that I'm using should be the same one that you got in the packet from the bookstore, that little supplemental packet of worksheets that came with the access code. They're labeled Chapter 1 and then the title percents in this one. If you'll go to the My Math Lab website and look at the assignments, you'll notice they're labeled a little bit differently. The percents section in My Math Lab is labeled 1.IR.3. So there might be a little confusion there, but just go by the titles, percents here and percents in My Math Lab, and the content should match up appropriately. This is the third lesson in that Chapter 1 of the review book, which is why it's 1.IR.3. But to use percentages is really not too bad, or pretty straightforward idea. The idea is that if we're using a percentage, we're talking about parts out of 100. So when we say 100%, we mean the whole thing, or we mean one thing. And then everything relative to that is divided appropriately. So to do these conversions, we'll just use this unit conversion. We'll remember that 100% equals 1. And then all of the conversions will be very, very similar to the conversions that we did in the last week's lesson. Okay, so for an example, let's work through some problems here. The first exercise asks us to convert a percentage into a fraction and then simplify it. So we're given 74%, and we'd like to convert that to a fraction. So our unit conversion will be 1 divided by 100%. We're using that. We need to make sure that the percentage is on the bottom of the fraction, or the denominator, so that it cancels out this percent unit that we already had. Percents are not really numbers, but the symbols cancel out the same way that units would cancel out and numbers would cancel out if we're dividing two things that are alike, that are exactly the same. So 74% times 1 divided by 100%. And this 1 divided by 100% is really the number 1, because the number on top and the number on bottom are equal. 1 and 100% are equal. So when we're multiplying any number by 1, we know that we're not changing it. We're not changing the amount, we're changing the way it's written, changing the unit that it's written in. So doing that, 74% times 1 divided by 100%, the percentages cancel, and that leaves us 74 divided by 100. Notice there's no more percent sign. We've taken something that was a percentage and we've converted it into something that's not a percentage. Now all we have left to do is to simplify it. The directions say simplify, and that's one of the things we have to do when we're working with fractions, make sure they're in lowest terms. To do that, we look at the 74 and the 100, and we ask ourselves, what number can I use to divide both of those evenly? Or what's the greatest common factor of 74 and 100? You'll notice that both of those are even numbers. So 2 is a candidate. We could divide both of the numbers top and bottom by 2, since they're both even. And that gives us 2 times 37 and 2 times 50. And then the 2's will cancel out, because 2 divided by 2 is 1. So that leaves us 37 over 50. And since 37 is a prime number, we can't simplify that anymore. So we're finished. And that's all we have to do to convert a percentage to a fraction. Let's try another one. You'll notice number 2, 18.5%. We'll start the same way, of course. Our unit conversion will be 1 divided by 100%. And then we get this 18.5 over 100. And 18.5 is not an integer. So before we think about what we could divide that by to simplify it, we need to make it an integer. And the easiest way to do that is to multiply the top and bottom by 10. Notice there's only one decimal position to the right here. So if I multiply by 10, I can make this 185. And if we do that to the top, we have to do that to the bottom too. So that becomes 185 over 1,000. And then we can simplify that the same way we did the other one. This is not even, it's odd, so we can't divide by 2. But 185 ends in 5, and any number that ends in 5, we can divide by 5. So we'll try 5. Top and bottom get divided by 5, and that leaves us with 37 over 200. Now it's simplified. If we want to make a percentage a decimal, again, decimals and fractions are really same kind of numbers, just written in a different way. So our conversion is still the same. We start with a percentage. We want to make something that's not a percentage. So we do the same conversion of multiplying by 1 divided by 100%. The only difference is we'll just write it as a decimal instead of as a fraction. So I would just use a calculator here if you need to. 43 divided by 100, you can write as 0.43. Dividing by 100 is pretty easy to do without a calculator. You can just move the decimal 2 places to the left. So 0.43, however you get there is fine. Similarly, in 8, even though this 89.145% looks messy, still the same conversion, multiply by 1 over 100%, and still the same result. 89.145 divided by 100 gives us this 0.89145, which is the same number we start with, just with the decimal two places to the left. And then the others are very similar. If we have a number that we want to make a percentage, notice the directions say here, convert to a percent, so we want to end up as a percentage, then now my unit conversion has to be different. It has to be opposite of the previous examples. Here, we want the percent to be in our answer, so it needs to be on top instead of on bottom. So we'll just flip the 100% and the 1 over. That's called the reciprocal, where the numbers are just numerator and denominator are switched. And this is still 1, though. This is still not going to change the amount. It's just going to change the unit. So when I start with this number 0.61 and multiply by 100% divided by 1, I'll get 0.61 times 100, which is 61. And then notice there's now a percent sign. So the percent sign is part of my answer now, 61%. So I took a number, 0.61, that had no percentage, and I made it into a number that had a percentage. Okay. Same idea on 14, even though our number is a fraction, that's okay. We want to make it a percentage, so we multiply by 100% over 1. And this time, the hundreds cancel, so it's, again, an easy calculation to do. We just end up with 41 and the percent sign, 41%. Okay. For 15, same process. We start with this 19 over 53 number, multiply by 100% over 1. The only difference is now our multiplication and division are not so easy to do in our head. We have to do 19 times 100. That's easy, 1900. But then we have to divide by 53. That's a little tougher to do. So at this point, I would grab a calculator, type in 1900 divided by 53. And the directions don't say to round to a particular place value. So we'll just round this to, say, the 10th place, 35.8%. If you want to go to a different place value, that's fine as well, since our directions were not specific there. And that's all there is to converting between fractions, percents, and decimals.